Well, hello everyone. In today's video, we're going to talk about helping your teenage son with regards to unwanted or bad behavior. Specifically, this is around a question I got the other day. It's around a teenage son that's maybe started to watch inappropriate content on either their phone or their computer. And this is a big concern for parents. So today I'm going to share a few strategies for how you can deal with this unwanted behavior. So let's get started. Well, hello again, everyone. My name is Jim White, and I'm an author, coach, and the founder of the Family Enrichment Academy. In today's topic, we're going to be talking about helping your teenage son with bad behavior, more specifically, bad behavior around watching inappropriate content on their phone or their computer. Before we dive into a couple of strategies there, though, I wanted to let you know that I have a gift for you today. As with all issues, one of the things that can help us get through these issues is if we could get our teenager to open up and talk to us a little bit more. To be comfortable talking to us about concerns or worries that they have. Well, it's in that vein that I have this free resource, again, a gift that I'd like to offer to you. When people ask me, well, how do I get my teen to open up? The simple solution is to ask better questions. And so what I have for you today is a guide, if you will. And within this guide, I have 10 questions that you should never ask your teenager. Think of these as like conversation killers. And then I also, with that, have 10 great questions. These are the conversation starters. And so every parent with a teenager should have this resource. It'll help you to get your teen to open up. And I promise you, if you start incorporating these better questions into your conversations, you'll be able to open up that teen and have a real conversation by tomorrow. So be sure to click that link down below, and we'll send you over this free resource. So anyway, back to our topic today. Well, we're going to focus on our three basic fundamentals. The first thing we're going to talk about a little bit is your mindset and how you're approaching this particular issue with your teenage son. And then secondly, we'll dive into a few strategies for building connection. Because again, like I always like to encourage people to think and parents to think is, with that strong connection, you have the ability then to influence or empower your teenager. If you don't have that connection, then there's no hope to be able to do that. So the second fundamental is always around building connection. And I've got an interesting strategy for that today as well. And then finally, we'll dive into, okay, how do we influence and empower that teenager, and some ideas and strategies for opening up this conversation and how to have this conversation around inappropriate content. So let's get started, dive into, but we're going to start with that mindset and where you're coming from with regards to this particular issue. So when it comes to your mindset with regards to this particular issue, many parents, or actually most parents, really struggle with the idea of just trying to go in and control what's going on with their teenage son. They just want them to not do this anymore, and they try to put on limits and restrictions to again, control the situation. Well, I'm going to invite you to rethink that a little bit, because control is not the goal. When they're young, you can control what happens in the environment, what's going on with your child. But as they grow into their teen years, and especially as they grow into their later teen years, this is going to be an ongoing source of conflict if you're always trying to control what your teen does, because they're becoming their own person and they want to be able to make their own decisions. And so our focus as a parent should turn more what I'll call inside out, or take an inside out approach. You want to be able to influence or empower your teenager from the inside for them to become a better person, if you will. You want them to be able to make better choices, but that's up to them and in what's going on inside of them. So again, the first step in this mindset shift is to let go of your need to control and shift your focus to how you can influence or empower that teenager from the inside out, so that they make the choice to, in this case, not watch the inappropriate behavior or the inappropriate content because they just feel like that's the right thing to do. You see how that's a different approach or different mindset? It's not because you think it's the right thing to do, it's because they know that it's the right thing to do. And you get them there by influencing them from the inside out. The other thing I like to share with parents is this idea that all bad behavior is a call for love. So whenever your teenager does something, in this case, viewing inappropriate content, it's a call for love. Something's, and I say that because they're not full of, if you will, or they're not experiencing love from the, again, inside out for them. And so when they are not in that place, they will make bad choices. And so part of the role of you as the parent is to help fill them with love so that then they make choices out of a loving perspective as opposed to whatever it is that they're experiencing, which is going to be fear of some kind. So that shift in thinking of all of this bad behavior as a call for love is another piece of this. And part of your role, to be quite honest, is I like to encourage people to think of themselves, you're the hero within the family. You're the adult and the hero, and your job is to take a stand for love within your family and to interject that into this circumstance, into this scenario. And if you do that, love has healing attributes, and it will help to shift this whole scenario circumstance. So anyway, that's perspective for you. So the question would be, okay, what do I do or how do I do that? For this particular scenario, what I want to share is this idea of the first step is awareness for yourself. And so I'm going to invite you, the next time you start to think about or be confronted with this particular circumstance, I want you to just stop for a minute and take inventory, if you will, or an account of what you are experiencing. And maybe write it down, make a list of the different experiences or emotions that or feelings that you're experiencing. Are you worried? Are you angry? Are you frustrated? Whatever comes up for you, make a note of that and note what they are. And what my guess is, most of them are going to be what I'll call negative experiences or emotions. And these are signals that you're not coming from a love-based perspective. And so make a note, be aware. This is an awareness exercise, create some awareness. And then the second step is to create a pause, which you've kind of done by stopping and taking time to write it down. You've sort of given yourself a moment to back away and created a little bit of a pause. And once you have that pause, the next step is to ask this question of, well, if I look at this particular scenario from a loving perspective, what do I see? And this will help to create that shift in your mindset. And then the follow-up question is, okay, well, from this perspective, what can I do to help move this forward? So look at that, shift that perspective, then ask, how can I move this particular situation forward, and see what comes up for you. So that's the first step in this is your mindset and making that shift from being frustrated, disappointed, angry, which are all signs of more of a fearful perspective, into more of a love-based perspective, because that's your role. Your role is to bring love to the table and to interject that into the situation so that your teenager starts to experience that as well. And again, as they experience more love from the inside out, they're going to make better choices and more responsible choices. So that's step number one. Now, once you're there, we'll move to step number two, which is building connection. So I'm going to throw out a couple of new strategies and some ideas for building connection, which is huge when it comes to being able to empower or influence your teenager. So the second fundamental that we focus on here at the Family Enrichment Academy is the idea of building connection with your teenager. Now there's two strategies or two, components to building connection. First, there's the preventative element. And this is, what I mean by that is just everyday activities that you do, all with the intention of how you can build and develop your connection with your teenager. And then the second area is the heat of the moment items. This is when life is putting the squeeze on you, if you will, and there's some kind of a conflict or an issue. And there's strategies for how can I use that particular circumstance as a way to build connection as well. Well, today we're going to focus on more of an idea or a strategy for preventative connection building, a way to build connection ahead of time. And what this does is it gives you a platform, if you will, or it builds that relationship so that when you are going to have a conversation about, in this case, viewing inappropriate content, there's already a platform, or there's some respect there and an openness from your teenager to listen to what you have to say, because this connection has already been nurtured and developed. So we're going to start by talking about some preventative maintenance, if you will. And what I would throw out is the idea of a shared experience. I'm actually kind of stealing this idea from a minister, actually, that was telling me about an event that they did at their church. And it happened to be with mothers and daughters, where they did a mud run. And the mother and daughter went through this experience together. And it just was a real bonding time for them. And so what I'm throwing out is for you to think about and get creative about how you might be able to create a shared experience with your teenage son. For example, and again, you got to think about who they are and what their interests and likes are. But if, let's say, your teenage son likes to fish and hunt or camp, maybe you go on a camping trip just with them. So again, you got 2 or 3 days together, sharing that experience and that time together. If that's not, let's say your teenage son's into gaming, let's say. Well, maybe you look and you find a gaming convention that's going to be going on either in your city or a city that's close by, and you plan and you lay out a trip, if you will, to go and experience this gaming convention, and you go with them. And again, that's a shared experience. Another great way is to learn something new together. Again, with a teenage son, a great suggestion might be take for example, a martial arts class together, because your son might be interested in that. So again, think about your particular son, what their interests are, and see if you can come up with a way to have a shared experience that's related or in an area that they're interested in or that seems important to them. So that is just a tremendous way to build connection. And then I'm going to add a challenge for you as well. And this again comes from the thing that the pastor shared with me about the mother-daughter event. What I'm going to encourage you to do is ahead of time, I want you to write a letter to your son. And in this letter, I want you to share your hopes, your dreams, and your aspirations for them, as well as the qualities that you see within them, the positive qualities that are going to help them to accomplish those hopes and dreams and aspirations. And again, I want you to write it ahead of time. And then if you're on this fishing trip, for example, at the appropriate time, you pull that out and you give it to them. And you don't have to say a whole lot, you just give it to them and say, I just wanted you to have this and to know this. And that letter, I promise you, will become something that they cherish going forward. And it'll help build connection. And in fact, again, this pastor mentioned when they've done this with the mothers and daughters, that the daughters would take these letters with them to college, for example. And when they were feeling homesick or struggling a little bit with something that was going on, when they were away from home, they would pull out these letters and reread them, and it just helped to reconnect them with their families. So I really encourage you to take that challenge on as well. Find a way to build this connection through shared experience, but then take the time to write something ahead of time and give it to them as it's a physical gift, if you will. And again, there's no money cost when you think about it, but it's so valuable to your teenager to do that. So anyway, the second fundamental, building connection, and try to work and find some ways to do that in a preventative maintenance, ahead of time, so that then you're in a better position to have one of these more difficult conversations. So I challenge you to take that on, see what you can do. So now we're ready for this final step of how do we influence or empower our teenage son to make better choices. I mean, we've got ourselves, as a parent, you're in a better mindset, and again, you're trying to approach this from a love-based perspective. That was step number 1. And if you've done some work to build connection, you now have that relationship to where you can have some influence. So now we're moving into maybe the more challenging part, which is actually providing or trying to empower them or influence them to make better choices. And again, I would remind you from what we've talked about, this is not about controlling what they do. This is about empowering them to make a better choice. So again, it's more of an inside-out approach, and we're trying to basically influence their character, if you will. So that's where we're heading for all this. So what I would throw out is a great way to start one of these conversations. It starts with being aware, and kind of as you go through your daily interactions with them, something will come up that presents an opportunity for you to bring up a conversation about inappropriate content or about just respect for women and girls overall. And for example, let's say a song comes on the radio, and in the song there's some lyrics that are disrespectful, or that they say some things that are inappropriate from your perspective. And so what you do is you open the conversation by asking your son what he thinks about that. You say, well, that seemed a little disrespectful. How do you feel about that? So again, you're having them be a little bit respectful and having them reveal a little bit about their character. And let them talk a little bit. Be curious. Ask them, well, what, do you hear other boys talk like this? And what do they say? Again, you're just trying to have them be a little reflective. And then at a point where it seems appropriate, you can introduce maybe a little bit of judgment into this conversation where, let's say, for example, you have a teenage daughter as well. Maybe it's a sister of your son that's a little bit older or a little bit younger. You could ask, well, what would happen if one of your friends talked like this about your sister? You see how that introduces a little bit of a character judgment and maybe shifts that perspective for them a little bit in how they are viewing the scenario. Or if let's say there's not a sister, you could even ask it this way. You could say, well, what if you were with some of your friends and their father said something about your mother that you felt like was disrespectful? Again, it opens it up and it sort of personalizes it a little bit for them and has them start to reveal, for themselves, their character, their attitude. And then you sort of wrap it up with just that conversation where you throw out to them, you say, well, you're growing into a young man now, and it's going to be up to you to make your own choices. Again, you sort of relinquish that control and you throw it back to them. You're going to be making decisions with regards to how you treat girls or the women in your life, and it's up to you. And then you sort of you bring it back to you, saying, and I have found that it's really a reflection of my character, and it's important that I be intentional and be kind with regards to the way I talk or the way I interact with women, for example. So you start to introduce this idea that it's their responsibility and that it's going to be a reflection of them and who they are and their character. And so have they thought about that? Or and then you leave with some questions. You can say, and if you ever want to talk about this, I'd love, we can engage a little bit and talk if you have concerns or not real sure, how you feel about it. I'd be here to be a sounding board for you. So again, you just sort of walk into this conversation by getting them to be a little self-aware, asking them what's going on for them, introduce some of your thoughts and values and how it's important to you, and it's a reflection of you, which then and transfer that to them, say, well, however you handle these situations, the things you say, the things you do are a reflection of you and your character. And then you position yourself as being able to be somebody that can advise or help them with the scenario. So can you see how this is a lot different than trying to control what they do? And again, the end goal is to help them to develop into a better person. And you do this by engaging with them from this manner. And again, it goes back to how you do in this situation as a parent, and are you coming from a love-based perspective which allows you to fill them with love, and when they're more full of love, they're going to act and more responsible, and they're going to act with kindness, and they're just going to be a better person as well. So anyway, that's that last step, is this idea of empowering and influencing them, and you do that by opening this conversation up. If you have questions, I'd love to hear down in the comments below. You can share some of your thoughts or ideas around this. Or if you have questions, I'd be happy to engage with you a little bit and maybe help you to work through how you might bring it up and engage with your son and help move them and help to empower them to be a better person as well. So let's recap. So today we've been talking about helping your son and dealing with teenage son that has bad behavior. And specifically we're talking about them viewing or watching inappropriate content on their phone or their computer. This can be a really sensitive topic for parents and one that can be difficult to address. So where we started, again to recap, we started with you and just where you're coming from. And again, I introduced this theme that we literally like to talk about here at the Family Enrichment Academy. And that theme is that all bad behavior is a call for love. And it's your job, you're the hero within the family, and it's your job to bring love to these scenarios and to take a stand for love. And under the premise that as you can fill your teenager, in this case a teenage son, up with love, they're going to make better choices. You fill them with principles, values, and beliefs that are love-based. They're going to make better choices and just be a better person going forward. So that was step number one. Then step number two, we talked about building connection, because that's one of those fundamentals that comes out of that love-based perspective, is this desire and this need to build connection with your teenager. And then finally, once you've got that connection built, we talked about then how you influence and empower them develop as a person. And I gave some strategies for that as well. So anyway, that's a little bit of a summary of what we've covered today, and hopefully you found some value in this. I know this can be a difficult topic, but again, you just have to dive in, come from that love-based perspective, and remember, love has healing attributes. It always works. And so the more you can stay grounded in love, the better these scenarios are going to work out for you as you move forward. So again, hope you found some value here. It's I know it's difficult, but it's truly possible, and there is hope there, I guess is what I would share. So anyway, before we sign off, I did want to remind you that I do have that free resource, the guide with the 10 questions that you should never ask your teenager, those conversation killers, and then those 10 great questions as well, those conversation starters. So be sure to click down below and get that free resource. As always, it's just truly an honor to be able to serve you as you move along your parenting journey. And it is a journey. There's going to be a lot of challenges along the way. But again, there's so much opportunity and ability for you to grow and for your teen to grow as well as you move forward. And if you continue to just adopt that growth-based mindset and try to interject love as much as possible in this scenario, there's a lot of hope out there, and all things are possible with love, as you say. So anyway, it's truly an honor. Remember, until next time, a change in perspective changes everything.